Hello there, this is Redjoy, and this is a new look at Clerics and their kits for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. Clerics are one of three main casters for Divine Magic in Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. They have really great access to armor, they have decent access to different weapons, and they can use different things to protect themselves, such as a helmet, such as shields, in order to protect themselves. And that doesn't even go into the divine casting that they get. Clerics get a variety of spells to help to buff their stats, help to protect their teammates, they help to summon really powerful critters that help them in combat, and they can use a lot of things to control combat, to debuff or to stun their enemies, while the rest of the party does some pretty powerful things to them. And then there's the healing. Clerics get some of the best healing spells, maybe aside from the druids, and they have usually the obligation of making sure that they keep the party alive for a long time. I'm going to go a little bit out of order with this guide because I'm going to talk about the kits first off. With the kits of the Cleric, they're going to get access to particular abilities or spells that are basically just additions to whatever the Cleric is. The only downside is that they have to be a particular alignment or set of alignments. So these Clerics have a very small trade-off. They can cast all the same spells that the normal base Cleric can. With the addition of these additional abilities, they're just more alignment locked based off of what god they worship. Being a priest of Talos, who is a storm god, you have a cleric that is required to be neutral evil, or chaotic neutral. They're going to get two abilities. First, they get the ability to cast lightning bolt, and then they get the ability to cast storm shield. Storm shield is pretty nice because you get elemental resistance and protection against normal missiles. Lightning bolt, I'm not a huge fan of, just because there's a bit of unpredictability with where the bolts go. I think Call Lightning would have been better. I think it's more thematic to what Talos is as a storm god, and I think it's much more reliable and scales much more powerfully than Lightning Bolt does. But if you're interested in just doing a lot of electrical damage or having protection against the elements, maybe you want to go for a Priest of Talos. It's up to you. Next is a Priest of Helm. Priests of Helm are required to be lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, or true neutral. Helm is a seer god, so you're going to get true sight, which allows for the cleric very early on to be able to see right through invisibility, which early in the game is very good against thieves and anyone who uses illusions. Later on, it does fall off a little bit because thieves get a little more clever with the AI and how to use invisibility. Invisibility isn't super powerful because you can pierce through it, but it's the speed at which the thief or the mage can cast it or put it on themselves to protect themselves that makes true sight slightly limited. But having true sight early on is a very, very good ability. They also get Seeking Sword. Seeking Sword is a sword that does 2d4 damage and gets a bonus to hit and gets an additional attack per round. However, when they summon the sword, they can't cast spells. So this is what you use, what normally you're supposed to use if you've run out of spells to cast. I'm not a big fan of this because you're still putting your cleric at risk. They're not going to be doing the same physical damage as a frontline fighter. Maybe if your frontline fighter is pretty much down or is out of combat or just has no way of protecting themselves and you want to hold them back and you want to have you need to have someone up at the front line who has decent armor and a helmet to go forward, then yes, Seeking Sword can be good, but I would be very cautious about using this. This is really in case of emergency option. Next is a Priest of Lathander. Lathander is a good god of renewal, creativity, and youth. He's kind of a healing god, and you're going to get lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, and true neutral as your alignments. You have the ability first to cast Hold Undead and second to cast Boon of Lathander. Hold Undead is pretty useless. I find it to be you would the only things it really impacts are things that you can kill very easily, even with a main cleric that doesn't have much combat ability. You're talking skeletons, zombies, ghouls, maybe ghasts, but you have to be at a high enough level for it to even begin to impact it. I think that just Hold Undead is just not very good to what you need it to do. Boon of Lathander does grant the caster a bonus to hitting, a bonus to damage, and attack per round, and it gives protection against level drain. So it's all of those things, and I believe the cleric can cast spells when they have the Boon of Lathander up. So that's, I would say, an even better ability than the Seeking Sword, because you get to actually use your class given abilities while you have this boon up. So I think that's actually a much better trade-off, and that kind of does a nice job of leveling out both Lathander and Helm. So you get different things, but I'd say that Boon of Lathander is much better than Seeking Sword is, but I'd rather take True Sight over Hold Undead. So it's got a nice leveling, and a lot of the alignments do overlap. Next is a Priest of Tyr. Tyr is a god of justice. You get to have Exaltation, which Exaltation is a touch spell that cures somebody of a bunch of ailments such as feeble mind, unconsciousness, intoxication, fear, sleep. It basically wakes them up and protects them. That's pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of the fact that it's a touch spell, but it's better than nothing, right? And then Divine Favor. Divine Favor will grant a 2-round buff to hit and to damage. It's good, but it's very short-lived. So this is kind of a, okay, your other buffs maybe have gone down, pop this on, and you're good. I almost forgot to mention, Priests of Tyr are required to be either lawful good, or lawful neutral, meaning you can't be true neutral as a Priest of Tyr, which is kind of strange, but okay, whatever. Lawful neutral is the closest thing to it. Finally, there's the Priest of Tempus. Priest of Tempus. Tempus is a battle god, so you are required to be more on the chaotic side, chaotic good, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil, or true neutral. A Priest of Tempus gets the ability to cast Holy Power, which is a caster buff. It's pretty good, and you can use spells while you have it up, so that's not bad. And then they get Chaos of Battle. Chaos of Battle is a little bit strange. Basically, it adds a random number value, either adds or subtracts it to you and your party and to your opponents. So this can affect armor class, hit points, THAC0, saves, or luck. The magnitude is starts at 1 and then goes up and down at different levels and improves by 1 for each level of the caster. So you don't know what's going to be impacted when you cast this spell. It's a little bit like wild magic, except it's not nearly as fun, and it's less predictable in a kind of moderate scale way. So I would never plan on using this because you don't know what you're going to get. But it might be fun to play around with if you're interested in being a battle priest. With that being said, if you are going to be a mainline cleric, you are not alignment locked at all. So you can be any of the alignments, and it's not going to impact any of your abilities. Alright, so for ability scores, the big thing you want to need to boost up is Wisdom. With any divine casting, there's no reason why Wisdom should not be 18. It impacts the number of spells that you get to cast every single day. It's wonderful. Boost up that Wisdom. Next, you want to boost up Dexterity and Constitution for survivability. Just like any non-warrior, Constitution just needs to be 16 to get the maximum HP, and Dexterity has no reason not to be 18. With this point, I would not worry about intelligence. Intelligence is not going to benefit you all that much. You might want to consider it for lore, but it's not really that important. I would actually put my points into strength, and that's because if you're picking up heavy armor, if you're wanting to wear heavy armor or things like that, then you want to make sure you have maximum strength. And plus, aside from the fighter, and I'm not saying you should go into combat, but aside from the fighter, the cleric is the second most likely to be able to engage at the front line. Again, I'm not saying you should, but we all have those oh crud moments, and you've cast all your spells and your fighter is only about a quarter of their HP. you gotta send in somebody to get some good hits or to be the center of damage, and you've buffed up your cleric, just send them on in. With 18 strength, you get help with doing that. Also with the other survivability stats and with divine casting, you're not looking at a terrible, horrible frontline fighter, but again, I would stress that they are not a frontline fighter the same way that a fighter or a paladin or a ranger or even a monk are. Now, one final note. I made a comment about intelligence. I just want to let you know you don't want this to ever go below 8 because there are wands that clerics can use, and if your intelligence is under 8, then you're not going to be able to use wands or read scrolls or anything like that because you're basically illiterate. So don't put it too low. Also, mind flayers do sneak up and can gulp out your brains really quickly. So some people like to boost it up to 11 just to protect against that. I don't see, if you want to boost it up to 11, fine. I just don't think that that's absolutely necessary because the number of instances that happens is relatively low. But intelligence, just make sure it's at least 8. For weapon proficiencies, you're going to be talking about anything that has blunt or spiked damage, what they used to call spiked damage, and then certain missiles that will allow for you to replicate blunt damage. So warhammers, clubs, flails, morning stars, maces, staves, and slings. I personally think sling is a actually much better weapon than people realize because you're adding in your strength score to the damage. I really like it. I almost used it for all of my clerics. I think flails are probably the best of these options because you get the best options for magical weapons. I feel really sad about warhammers. I wish they did more damage because they look so darn cool. But, I didn't make the game, so I can't necessarily say why. They have a 1d4 plus 1 base damage. That's silly to me. That's only 1 point better than a dagger, which is so weird. Regardless, maces are also a good choice, and if you want to go two-handed, quarterstaffs aren't bad, but don't sleep on slings. Don't sleep on slings. They work just fine. That's a good missile. For skills, the cleric is going to be able to turn undead. If you're a good or neutral cleric, that means that either you will scare the undead off or you will just destroy them outright. If you're an evil cleric, you will either scare them off or you will turn them over to your side and you'll have them fight for you. I have used turn undead. I enjoy it in certain situations, handling the Shade Lord stuff and having a really powerful cleric there to waltz through, turn undead, and just watch everything die really quickly. I actually think it's kind of fun. But that's just one circumstance where it's used. There aren't that many other places where it's used super effectively. I think one of the worst things you can do is if you're an evil cleric and you're fighting against another evil cleric and you're both trying to turn undead, spoiler alert, they're going to win. They're a higher level than you, they will win, and if the worst part is if you've summoned undead and they're using a turn undead, they can turn your undead against you, so that's not fun. So be very careful about turn undead and don't just leave your cleric hanging there. I think they're going to be much better served casting spells and maybe even fighting than trying to stand there turning the undead, except in very particular circumstances. So clerics are divine casters, which means they're going to have 7 levels, spell levels, that they can cast from. The cool part about clerics as well as druids is they have access to their full library when they level up to each new spell level. So as a cleric, you get the opportunity to cast any spells that are in your spell book. You'll notice I have a few extra spells thanks to SCS, and there are some phenomenal spells here, and there are some not so great spells. So if I want to give some advice for early spells to cast, very early on, you're not going to need Cure Light Wounds right away. It's like the one that a lot of people think to go to because, oh, easy healing, great, awesome. You're not going to need it right away. The big ones that you will want right away, Command Word Die is really good because there's no save for creatures under level 6, so it knocks them out for one turn and you can just wail on them and get a lot of free hits in. Sanctuary is very good. for basically being able to just walk through certain circumstances without being impacted. Remove Fear is not bad, especially in very certain circumstances. This is normally a level 2 arcane spell, so you get it basically to use it at level 1 for a cleric. That's pretty good. And then Bless is not bad as long as you have a party, right? If you don't have a party and it's just you, there's other things that you can use. So later on, I think Cure Light Wounds is fine, especially if you're like about to go rest. And this is true for any healer. If you're going to go rest, then you will be able to have spells automatically cast before you rest. So you'll notice that your party will have a lot of their hit points healed after you rest, more than you would normally get if you didn't have a healer in your party. As a final note, there are some great spells here that do buff throughout the entire game. Armor of Faith is really nice because it will actually scale very nicely. So this is another one of those spells that you don't need right away, because the immediate benefit is only 5%. That's not good, but at level 20, having a quarter of any damage that comes in taken off or protected against, that's pretty good. And you get 1 additional round per level of the caster. At level 20, that lasts for a very long time. So later on, pick up Armor of Faith and use it, whether you're talking about your frontline cleric or cleric fighter, or I don't know, somebody else who gets Armor of Faith. It's a good spell. So a cleric's wisdom score is going to directly impact the number of spells they get to cast a day. So if you did what I told you and you made their wisdom score an 18, they're going to get lots of spells per day. You can thank me later for that. Clerics are among the best healers in the game, maybe again aside from druids and shamans. But like all versions of D&D, you shouldn't just have your cleric just as a heal bot, right? Their purpose is to benefit the entire party outside of wounds and outside of just making sure that everybody's face is pretty, right? You have a lot of spells here that can help them get in and out of bad situations. You have a lot of spells here that can buff the entire party. You have certain spells like Curse and like Doom that are also good spells, by the way, that I didn't mention earlier, that can impact an opponent's ability to withstand any spells that are cast or any effects that are impacting them. This is all very good, and I would say that these are just outside of the healing. So don't just use your cleric as a heal bot. Don't just put all of your spells into Cure Light Wounds or whatever the next big healing spell is. In fact, a lot of the healing spells that you get each level, some of them aren't even worth taking because they don't heal as much as you think they should, right? It's only a little pip of healing that they grant. But you want to use spells that will benefit the party throughout the entire game, not just when they're injured. That's why you really shouldn't sleep on spells like Command, like Doom, like Sanctuary. Sanctuary, please, 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 if I tell you anything, put at least 1, maybe 2 of your initial spells into Sanctuary. If you're soloing right away, that's going to get you out of a lot of bad circumstances. The really great thing I like about clerics, as well as with druids, is they are encouraged to use a lot of different spells every single day, right? They have their full library that they get. They can cast any spell from their library right away. So they're encouraged to try out new spells in different circumstances. It's a great way of testing what really works for your party, what are good strategies that you really like using. You may really find that having Sanctuary up on your cleric in the middle of combat is really useful. Getting them to move around and then pop another offensive spell when they're ready to cast it, that might be great. Other times, you may just want to put all 3 into command and just knock out as many opponents as you can while your fighters go in and slap the opponent silly. And you know what? You play the one you want to play. If you want to turn your cleric into a heal bot and make them have Cure Light Wounds for days, go right ahead. It's your game. You enjoy how you play it. I wouldn't necessarily play it that way, but again, you decide. You have that flexibility as a cleric that you can decide whatever you want to do in what choices you have for casting. So that's going to be it for today. Eventually I am going to do a list of my favorite divine casting spells, and I'll differentiate them between what cleric spells and what are druid spells, and even a few shaman spells that I really enjoy casting, that unlike other guides that are amazing and are out there, I'm just going to make what are my favorites per each level. And I haven't made that guide yet, so don't look for it just yet. Hopefully it'll come sometime this year. But in the meantime, you should definitely play the Cleric and decide for yourself which ones are your favorite Cleric spells. For now, take care and good luck. We're all counting on you.